we're going to create 4 exercises to train different figure drawing skills. The first is a straightforward simplification of the pose. The second is posterizing the image to simplify the values. The third is combining those 2 types of simplification. And the fourth is exaggerating the pose, which is really hard to do. And this trick is really going to help you learn how to do it. So modifying references this way makes the practice sessions easier, but more importantly, they help you to get good at drawing fast.
Trying to produce beautiful artwork every time you sit down and practice is not the best way to train your drawing skills. Like, each of these machines, at least in theory, isolates a group of muscles. And that's what we want to do with our fundamental drawing skills. We want to create exercises that focus on a fundamental drawing skill and keep training until our artistic eyeballs are like Arnold Schwarzenegger, right? Oh, sorry.
So my name's Kenzo, this is Love Life Drawing. So you can do this digitally, like on an iPad or in Photoshop or Sketchbook or any other drawing app, and you can also print out your reference and draw right onto that, or use tracing paper. So for the first exercise, we're just trying to find the simple lines that we would use for a quick sketch of this pose. So these are lines and curves that we talk about here at Love Life Drawing all the time. We're going to look for the outlines of the forms, but also lines that go around and across the figure, like across the bottom of the chest or across the bony bits of the pelvis, the torso center line on the front or the spine line on the back. We're going to look for the form of the deltoid on the shoulder, the collarbones, the brow line on the head. So these are important to the structure and the forms of the figure. And as we go, we want to use C-shaped curves, S-shaped curves, straight lines, and nothing more complicated than that. We're also going to look for asymmetry in the curves as we do this. So if you're not sure why these things are important, try our Figuary 2020 series, which you can watch on this channel. I'm going to link to it below. So now I'm going to draw this, but I don't need to simplify the figure and draw that simplification all at the same time. I've split the process into 2 steps. So I've got the simplification already, and now I just need to draw that ready-made simplification. I know that someone is going to be tempted to comment, "Oh, you're just tracing's stupid." People have this knee-jerk reaction to drawing onto references sometimes. Well, firstly, there's nothing wrong with tracing as a training tool, in my opinion. And secondly, this isn't easy to simplify the figure. Even when you're drawing right onto the reference, it's hard to do. So try doing it before you dismiss the idea. And then thirdly, you draw the traced simplification, which is itself another challenge. It's tough. And the point is that we're isolating different parts of the process and training them one by one. So the first step, it works out our simplification muscles. The second step works out our observational muscles and ability to draw what we're seeing. The second exercise is to simplify down the values, the light and the dark. And that's a really important skill. So we're going to want a reference which ideally has one direct light source so that we've got nice clear shadow shapes on the figure. And the first thing that we're going to do is just remove all the color so it's just black and white. Then we just can see the light and the dark. Now the next part is to simplify the values, and you can do that manually by drawing onto the figure and separating it into areas of light and dark. But something that can help you while you're getting started is to posterize the image, because there's almost infinite levels of value of how dark or light each little pixel of the image can be. Posterizing it brings all that variation down to however many levels you want. So you could have 4 or 5 levels of light and dark. So here I've posterized the reference to have just 4 levels of light and dark. And so you can notice that large shapes of dark or light or mid-tone have been created. Photoshop has a posterize function, but I don't have Photoshop. Procreate doesn't have one yet, but I found a posterize tool online by Googling posterize tool, which worked pretty well. So I want to take it further though. I'm going to use 3 levels, so light, dark, and mid-tone. I won't just use this as it is though. I'm not just going to use it as the software gives it to me. I want to merge the midtone and the light areas. And then I'm going to draw onto the shapes to simplify them further. And I'm even going to remove some of them. And I'm just trying to find really, really simple shapes that still get across the pose. Just going through this process is going to be a workout for your simplification skills. So now I have this simple set of shapes to draw. And so why is this a good thing to do? Why is this good practice? Well, when you have all the details of the figure, your eyes are going to pick up on all these little contrasts too much. So if you want to learn more about that, check out our video about the simultaneous contrast illusion, which I'm going to link below. It's an interesting one. When you're drawing, you can squint to simplify the figure's values. That way you basically blur out all the details, and it's a good thing to do, but the problem is that then it's hard to see the shapes clearly because you're squinting and everything's blurry. So you kind of squint to understand the bigger shapes, but then you open your eyes back up to see a bit more clearly, keeping that simplified version, that blurry version in mind. That's quite a tricky skill to develop, but with this, we've got the simplified version. We worked on that first, and then we're drawing it. So we're making it a little bit easier on ourselves because we're just getting started with that skill. So now we're going to try and combine exercise 1 and 2. So we're going to draw our simplified figure with our simpler curves, and we're going to simplify the values as well and try to draw those simple shapes of light and dark too. So here I'm starting with my gestural simplified version of the pose, which I've drawn onto the reference. And next I'm trying something out. I'm going to cover the paper with some willow charcoal, and I'm going to remove the charcoal with a putty rubber to create the shapes of light from my posterized version of the reference. And then I'm going to add some core shadow marks, basically emphasizing the edges of the shadow shapes that I've drawn. And I'm just kind of doing quick sketch versions of all of these exercises for this video, but you can do longer drawings with these simplified references as your starting point as well.
So just before we get to exaggerating poses, I wanted to let you guys know I've been doing some free life drawing live sessions, and you only find out about stuff like that if you're signed up to our newsletter. And when you sign up, you get our free guide, Life Drawing Success. So it's worth signing up, and we send out weekly tips. So it's a good newsletter. Check it out. Okay, let's get back to exaggerating poses.
Okay, so let's get to exaggerating the pose. This is a cool one. So you may have heard that it's useful for gesture to be able to exaggerate the pose in a meaningful way, but it's hard to do that in practice. First, you have to figure out what about the pose you want to exaggerate. So in this case, I found that tricky. Like, what did I want to exaggerate? You can see I'm trying to figure it out here. I'm getting confused. In this case, I ended up deciding to rotate the rib cage more, have more of a squash on this side, more of a stretch on this side. And then you have to exaggerate things in a way that the figure still makes sense structurally. So it's pretty tricky to do that. So if you want to push the angle of the rib cage like I want to do here, then you have to bring everything else attached to the rib cage with it. So you've got to move the head across, you've got to rotate the collarbones and the shoulders and so on. And you're going to want the squash and stretch in the midsection to accommodate the exaggerated ribcage angle. So that kind of stuff, it's tricky to do. I've done it right onto the reference first, and I'm ready to draw it now. So if I were trying to figure out that exaggeration, just from looking at the figure and draw it at the same time, that's hard to do. So doing it in 2 steps this way makes it more doable. Now, of course, with all these exercises, the ultimate goal is to be able to do it without modifying the reference or do it from a live model. So as you get better and better with these training exercises, doing it from the live model or just doing it from the reference without touching the reference is going to become easier and easier. And when you design your exercises, you just want to make sure that they are exercises that are going to help you to build useful skills. So stuff like this, like simplifying the pose, simplifying the values, exaggerating, those are things that you're going to want to do when you're doing figure drawing. Something like adding a grid over the reference and then using the grid on your drawing to kind of transfer the reference to the paper, that's not going to help you train up these fundamental skills that you can then use with a live model or in other scenarios. So you do kind of have to be thoughtful when you're designing these exercises. So a master is just a beginner who kept on training, and you've got to make your training doable and focused on specific skills. So there should be another video somewhere on the screen. Check it out, and I'll see you over there.